credo che voi che seguite l'informazione locale, non solo locale, ormai conosciate bene Micheael Weisskopf, perché nel corso degli ultimi 10 giorni è stato presente ripetutamente sui mezzi di informazione, dal momento in cui la commissione dell'Urbino Press Award, questo premio che esiste dallo scorso anno e che ha come obiettivo quello di premiare i reporter statunitensi che si distinguono per il lavoro che svolgono in giro per il mondo, ha annunciato presso l'ambasciata italiana a Washington ad aprile che Micheael Weisskopf era il premiato per l'edizione di quest'anno. Perché Micheael? È stata una scelta articolata quella che ha portato la commissione a individuare questo giornalista e questo personaggio, che incarna perfettamente quello che è lo spirito dell'Urbino Press Award, ovvero andare a identificare persone, reporter, giornalisti nei diversi settori della comunicazione che seguono in prima persona, in prima linea, quelle che sono le aree del mondo al centro dell'attenzione dei media, per poi parlare con i loro lettori, i loro ascoltatori attraverso i mezzi di comunicazione dei quali fanno parte, per spiegare, dare la loro visione di quel mondo, di che cosa sta accadendo in quelle zone calde. Come ricorderete, anni fa Time Magazine aveva scelto come uomo dell'anno, personaggio dell'anno, i soldati americani, i soldati statunitensi, e li aveva messi in copertina alla fine dell'anno, come fa Time per ogni edizione di fine anno, scegliendo la persona, il personaggio dell'anno. Micheael Weisskopf era stato inviato in Iraq proprio per vedere da vicino come operavano questi soldati. Era il 2003, dicembre, e lui è andato e nel giro di poco è rimasto coinvolto in un attacco, in un incidente direttamente sul terreno, con un gruppo di militari più il suo fotografo. Stava perlustrando una zona di Baghdad, e quando a un certo punto si è ritrovato dentro il veicolo militare nel quale viaggiava una granata. Un momento di sorpresa, come ricorda Weisskopf in questo suo libro di grande successo, da poco pubblicato. Il momento di sorpresa, cosa fare, cosa non fare, e istintivamente lui prende la granata e cerca di buttarla fuori dalla macchina. In parte ce la fa, però gli parte anche la mano e il braccio, perché nel momento in cui lancia la granata questa esplode, e quindi lui si ritrova, dice nel suo libro, come se avesse preso una colata lavica completamente con la mano. E questo è l'inizio della sua tragedia, che poi diventa invece un punto di partenza per una svolta nella sua esistenza. Cioè da una tragedia c'è una reazione, un modo di guardare diverso alla vita di tutti i giorni, ma anche capire che cosa fanno, come vivono questi soldati che rimangono mutilati, di cui poi in larga parte non si parla, e con cui lui ha condiviso l'ospedale, le terapie e poi anche la scelta di non mettere una protesi che mascherasse la sua menomazione, ma invece usare una protesi che diventasse una specie di marchio di riconoscimento, un marchio di fabbrica, perché diventava un segno del coraggio avere un uncino e far vedere, come tanti soldati fanno quando mettono una protesi che sostituisce una gamba o un braccio, insomma a quello al quale sono andati incontro. Quindi un personaggio che più in prima fila di così non poteva essere, che più da vicino non ha potuto seguire chiaramente questi episodi, se non ritornando, come ha detto prima, in un sacco di plastica, quindi è rimasto proprio al bordo di quel terribile equilibrio che è raccontare dal più vicino possibile gli avvenimenti e nello stesso tempo riportare a casa la vita. E quindi noi come Urbino Press Award, come commissione, abbiamo scelto Weisskopf perché crediamo che incarni in pieno quello spirito del giornalista che deve con onestà verificare dal più vicino possibile le notizie per poi parlare ai lettori. Questo è Micheael Weisskopf, and briefly I went
I agree with everything you
said. Sei d'accordo con tutto quello che ho detto? Briefly I went about
the story only from
a certain point of view of
Yes, it's a very good question. I really talked. It's called embedding. And basically what you do is you become an unofficial member of a platoon or a brigade. And I had been to Iraq before as an independent journalist during the war itself and after the war. This time I went back because every year in December, Time magazine writes what's called the Person of the Year. The person who's had the most impact.
Yeah, that's what I told you.
Okay, we took. And that year was devoted to the American soldier. So we had to spend time living with them, knowing them, and finding out what they thought of their work and what they thought of their jobs, what their jobs were like, what their living conditions were like. But it's, and this is what we did. Now, because I became indistinguishable, you understand that, from a soldier, I was wearing a flak jacket, a helmet. I wasn't carrying a gun, I was carrying a notebook. But for the Iraqis, I was the same. So when they threw the grenade in to the Humvee, it didn't matter to them. And we were able to, I was able to write, because of that perspective, I was able to write about the dangers of the soldiers face every day. I was also able to write about every aspect of a soldier's life. You know, how they eat and how they sleep and how they entertain themselves. And I was even able to write about how a soldier is wounded. That's why this book is called Blood Brothers, because it's about, I experienced the same thing they did. However, you were right that to tell the story of the American soldier in Iraq, I should have found out more about what the Iraqis thought of them, what the Iraqis, the ordinary Iraqis, every day, the average Iraqis think about them. And that's very hard to do from my perspective. And so the story was very good, and the story was finally told, even though I was injured because I had a partner who could write it. There's the actual story itself. And it was a good story, but I think in retrospect, I think it lacked a dimension. And but you know, you do the best you can in journalism. It's not perfect.
exactly what kind of rules you have to respect when you're embedded.
What type of rules?
Yeah.
No censorship rules at all. Nothing they don't. However, what happens is, because you become friendly with these people, you know, they feed you, they protect you, they give you housing, they show you porn movies in your free time. Whatever it is, you know, you get to be friends with them. So I think it's human nature, after weeks and weeks and weeks, to begin to see things from their point of view. That's the danger of it. But there are no rules, there are no censorship rules. You can write anything you want. And so, the only rule is you can't use your, back in those days we had satellite phones. We couldn't use satellite phones during a mission when we were on a patrol or something like that, because they were afraid that the insurgents, the fundamentalists, would see the would be able to pick up the satellite and find out what we're doing. Other than that, just we had to be careful, obey orders. Those are the only rules. But there are no censorship. Yes, sir.
Could you decide where to?
You all understand me, by the way?
Yeah.
Everybody understand me?
Yes, yes.
Could you decide where to go with the American soldiers, or
No.
they told you where to go?
No, I was really covering a platoon, and I just was like a shadow. And it's every journalist's dream is to become so close to the people they're covering, you know, that they're inside their skin almost, and I was. And so, but I was attempting to show what it was like to be a soldier in Iraq, in a war zone. And I picked a very tough zone, not an easy one. It was a very Sunni, tough Sunni neighborhood. Do you remember when the last time Saddam was seen in public, he jumped out of a car in front of a mosque. And that was the neighborhood. He picked that neighborhood because that was his favorite neighborhood. And that was the zone I covered and I was injured right in front of that mosque. The same mosque he was in. Yeah. So, yeah, I should have. I think I probably should have gotten out of the Humvee and asked people what they think of the American soldiers, but I didn't. Any other questions?
When the journalist is not protected by the army, do you think there has to be a limit for him? I mean, for example, of course you know the story of Daniele Mastrogiorno, the Italian reporter who was captured in Afghanistan. Well, some people in Italy blame him to be, not enough prudent.
Unnecessarily brave.
Yeah,
Unnecessary.
too brave. And some people say that he didn't consider the danger, to go in the southern Afghanistan. So my question is, if there has to be a limit for the journalist, and if yes, which one? Which is the limit?
Well, you want to get as close as you can to things that are not well understood. This is what Daniel Pearl did too. You know him?
Yeah.
Daniel Pearl, you know about him? And you have to take into consideration, and this is a big balance, you have to remember that you can't tell a story from a body bag. You know what a body bag is? And from the grave, you can't tell a story. So if it's your purpose to inform people, to tell a story, you have to make sure that you can survive well enough to tell the story. And so that's the balance in a war zone. Not everybody has got to become a war correspondent. Woodward and Bernstein never went to war. And they were fine correspondents, they're fine journalists. But for a war correspondent, and war is an amazing thing to cover, because you see life and death very close up. It's a very dramatic moment. I wanted to do that, and I saw it a little bit too close up. But anyway, you have to weigh the risks against the advantage, the benefits of getting the story. Every decision is separate, and you don't want to endanger others either.
Writing a degree about journalism in Iraq, and I interviewed the Italian journalists that worked like needed in Iraq, and the most difficult thing that they told me during the interview was to separate their life and the life of the soldiers, because they told me that when you are in a war, when you are needed, it's very easier live every day with the soldiers, so it's impossible to describe war in another way of the soldiers. Is your opinion about it?
During the fighting war, when it took about a month to knock out Saddam, I think that almost all the journalists were with the army. It's maybe the only way you could have covered it. There are a few of them left in Baghdad, but it was very dangerous because all the buildings were being bombed. But after the war stopped, when the war stopped, all the journalists went their own way, and including me. And now, almost everybody reports independently of the army. Nobody is, unless you want to see what is happening in Fallujah. You want to see how successful the U.S. was in stopping the insurgents in Fallujah, so then you have to go with the army. Go by yourself, you get kidnapped and killed in 5 minutes. No question. You know, Jill Carroll, you remember the American, she tried to pretend that she could be in Iraqis, and she put on the scarf over her head. She spoke a little Arabic, and they could tell in a minute that she was not an Iraqi, and they kidnapped her. And she's lucky she lived. But you can't. You can't pretend. There was a friend of mine, Giovanni doesn't much like him, but who worked with me in China. You might know of him, Tiziano Terzani. Anybody know him?
Yes.
I was in China with him for many years, and Tiziano was a wonderful journalist because he would get local people to like him, and he had eyes that were a little bit squinted, and at night he put on the Chinese outfit. He put on a Chinese hat, the blue hats they used to wear, and the blue, and he was quite big, but he spoke pretty good Chinese. And he was able to go and meet Chinese because he sort of looked Chinese. But that was different because there was no, if he was caught, the most important thing that nothing would really happen. He wouldn't have been killed. Nobody else would have been killed. But Iraq is very different. You cannot pretend to be an Iraqi, and if you're not, your life is in great risk.
And what it comes out from what you're saying is practically that anytime we hear about a journalist that is being kidnapped, practically there is a story of not being cautious or being naive or going a little bit too far. Is that true?
Yes, you have to know, you have to be very careful, you have to measure it. But just going into Iraq now, when I first started going into Baghdad, I'd go overland from Amman. Mm-hmm. And now if you did that, you'd be killed in 10 minutes on the road from the insurgents. So now you've got to fly in to Baghdad from Amman. And because the insurgents have the shoulder-fired missiles. I don't know, how do you say it, shoulder-fired?
Hanno le antiaeree portatili.
Yeah. They can shoot down airplanes. So what the airplanes have got to do is they fly what's called a corkscrew. Can you say corkscrew?
Sì, sì, cavatato. Scendono gli aerei con la tecnica del cavatato.
Straight down from the 30,000 feet above.
Da 30.000 piedi si buttano giù.
Straight down like a corkscrew. And at the last minute, so that they go so fast that the missiles can't hit them. The last minute they go. Even that's dangerous. So it's a very hard place to be.
Has your vision of that war changed after the incident?
It changed in many ways. First of all, it changed because I was, like everyone else, was fed lies about the nature of Iraq then. about the nature of weapons, of mass destruction, and also about the connection between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. So it changed that way, but more importantly it changed because I got very close to many people who were injured in the war. And my injury is a mosquito bite. How do you say that? Mosquito?
È un morso di zanzara il suo tipo di danno riportato rispetto a quello che altri soldati o altre persone hanno sul proprio corpo.
Compared to many soldiers who are, their brains are now injured. They're missing two legs and an arm. Both arms gone. They're blinded. They're burned badly. And everyone knows that war has an ugly face. Everyone knows that. But when you wake up next to it every morning and you see it so close, it changes you. And yes, so that changed my view of the war also, because the war did not seem worth that kind of loss of youth.
What about your life and your activity as a journalist? Has it changed a lot?
It has. My life has changed a lot. Does anybody know the photographer James Nachtwey? Very famous combat photographer. He was with me. He took a picture of me when I was injured in the Humvee, and I was laying on my back with my, in the Humvee, on the floor of the Humvee. My arm was in the air, I had no hand on it, and it was oozing blood. And he took a picture of that, and then he was injured too, and then he passed out. And so he gave me a copy of the picture, and it's a very gruesome, I say gruesome,
Truculenta.
yeah, disturbing picture. No newspaper would ever run it. But I put it over my desk because it reminds me of how fragile life is. And that in 1 second, your life could end. And I was lucky because there was a medic. How do you say medic? Medic, do you know?
C'era un'assistenza medica.
Yeah. In the truck behind me.
Nel camion che li seguiva.
Many people bleed to death from such injuries.
Molti muoiono dissequati prima che arrivi qualunque soccorso.
I was very lucky, but I keep the picture over my desk just to remind me that at all moments assume it's your last moment, and that to pay more attention to people you love and to things that are really important in life. And sometimes getting a story isn't that important. And so that's what it taught me about journalism, that journalism is not should not be for me more important than my family and people I love, and that was an important lesson because for many years it had been.
Did you go back to Iraq?
I have not been back to Iraq. I won't go back until I can report there without danger, and I can report on the full society. Now the society is it's very hard to report from the society because of the danger. And what I like about reporting is discovery, learning new things. But you really can't learn many new things if someplace is so dangerous that you can't visit it. And so I'll wait until the gunfire stops and there's some type of tranquility there. It's a very interesting place, and it's in the Arab world. It was probably a pretty good bet for a place for the Americans to find a friend, because it was at the time pretty secular. You know, how do you say secular?
Secolarizzato.
Yeah. Not like Saudi Arabia or Yemen or other places that have fundamentalist. So it was easy then. And it was very educated. The Iraqis were very educated, and I liked it very much. So.
One more thing, what you see usually on TV or you read on the newspapers, usually TV and newspapers focus on the tragedy of every day. Every day we turn on the TV and we see people blown up. Once you're there and you have the chance to be in touch with the normal people, that can be, how is the view of Iraq?
From the Iraqis' point of view? Or?
Yes, from the Iraqis' point of view or from the point of view of somebody that can spend some time actually with the people.
That's a hard thing to know because nobody can afford to do that. My understanding is I do have contact with some Iraqis still, but these are Iraqis who worked for Time magazine, so they're translators and drivers. And the impression I get is that Iraq today is far worse than it was under Saddam. Under Saddam, it was very politics was very dangerous, and it was a brutal place where his sons would specialize in torture and in rape and do anything they wanted. But there were only a couple of them. There were two of them. And Saddam and his secret police were very bad. So people lived under a lot of pressure. However, they ate well. They didn't have to worry about getting blown up when they went to buy vegetables. And they had jobs. And they couldn't protest, but who cares about protest, or who cares about free thought and freedom of speech if you can't walk outside your door without getting blown up? So I think that's their perspective, and it's a tragedy.
Un Iraq molto peggiore oggi di quanto fosse quello di Saddam, perché all'epoca era pericoloso fare politica, chiaramente.
It's a terrible tragedy.
Una terribile tragedia, e c'erano questi due figli specializzati in fare torture. Però i figli erano due. Tutto sommato oggi che cosa ti importa di poter fare politica o di avere libertà di pensiero quando non puoi in realtà uscire di casa perché rischi sempre di saltare per aria, non ci sono lavori e non c'è nessun tipo di sicurezza sociale e prospettiva. Quindi in questo momento la situazione è decisamente peggiore di quando Saddam era in comando.
Do you think there could have been a different way of acting, or if there is a way out?
Well, I think that it's like a burning house, that you only have a cupful of water to put the fire out of at this point. And I have a hard time imagining a way out. I think that the last idea of a surge was too little and too late. And if they really wanted to pacify the place, they would need another 200,000 American troops. And that's not going to happen because the war already is very unpopular in the U.S. But it didn't have to happen this way, I think. The United States, I think, had good intentions, had very good intentions, but as often happens, it was poorly executed. I think that...
Withdrawal a good option?
Pardon?
Withdrawal a good option?
Well, I think it's a good option. I think it would mean that Iraq would quickly become like worse than Afghanistan had been under the Taliban. And so the problem for all of our societies is, all our free societies, is that then it becomes a breeding ground for all the, you know what I mean, a breeding ground?
Un terreno di coltura diventa per tutte
for the terrorists.
le peggiori forme di terrorismo.
And they hate all the Westerners. They think we're decadent and we're sick, and we hate Mohammed, and that we spit on Mohammed, and they think all that about us. And they don't care if you're Italian or Spanish or American or German, it doesn't matter to them. We're all, everybody the same way. So it's a big danger if Iraq, you know, it's different when I was your age, it was during the Vietnam War, and there was a theory that if Vietnam fell to communism, that all of Asia would become communist. And that was stupid because each country was separate. Each country had its own national identity and its own history. But in this, and you could even know that then, even then you could know that. But here, nobody says, oh, well, if the United States leaves Iraq, then Iraqis will become anti-Al-Qaeda. Everyone believes that eventually the whole country will be run by Al-Qaeda, like the Taliban. Nothing to stop it. And so that's a big threat to all of us. And I think that, as you know, probably withdrawal is not a good option at this point. But I don't know what, you know, the other option is just continue this horrible war.
Quindi ritirarsi non è una grande opzione in questo momento, perché una guerra non sarebbe dovuta avvenire, c'è lui, perché è stata condotta male, è andata avanti peggio, sta producendo dei veri disastri. In questo momento l'Iraq tornerebbe sotto controllo se mandassero altri 200-300 mila soldati, ma ovviamente non è una cosa nemmeno ipotizzabile. Per cui diventerebbe solo un terreno di coltura per terroristi, probabilmente, se ci fosse un ritiro in questo momento. Molto diversa la situazione degli anni 60 con il Vietnam, quando si diceva che se il Vietnam fosse caduto tutta l'Asia sarebbe diventata comunista. In realtà erano tutti paesi separati. In questo caso non ci sono opzioni di questo tipo, tutti pensano che andando via diventerebbe come l'Afghanistan dei talebani, come minimo. Quindi è un problema per tutti.
But actually the question is what Saddam wants, because after the start of this war, Saddam says that it's impossible to win the war during the war, but after the war it's probably that arrived this situation, and especially the problem for what I studied is that American soldiers weren't not able to understand the local costumes, the local habit, because they had not accept the tradition of Iraqi people, of aims for the Iraqi people.
Well, they're not trained to be sociologists. You know, they're not
Sono
trained.
preparati per essere dei sociologi, i soldati americani.
Yeah, so they were sent there as soldiers, not as
Si
diplomats.
sono comportati da militari e non da diplomatici o da sociologi.
And so I mean, I think that there were some very bad cases like Haditha and some other cases. You know Haditha? Haditha, they know about, you know.
Conoscete il caso di Haditha?
There was some cases where the American soldiers lost control of themselves and killed innocent people.
Hanno perso totale controllo, no? In una fase di reazione hanno ammazzato intere famiglie.
I don't think it's a matter, the problem was with the soldier, I think the problem was with Washington. And that was the soldiers are soldiers everywhere.
I soldati sono soldati, il problema è Washington.
I was with them, you're right. I mean, when they thought, their intelligence told them that there was a terrorist who lived in a house, and at midnight, they go in the house, they knock the door down, they come in with their guns, and all they find is an old woman with a couple of children. That pisses off people, that makes people angry. But maybe there was a terrorist there before, maybe he heard about it and left. And so what are you supposed to do? But the soldiers act like soldiers, not like
Agiscono come soldati, in molti casi ricevono informazioni, come è accaduto in questo caso di cui fa riferimento, e ricevono informazioni che dentro una casa ci sono dei terroristi, vanno lì, buttano giù tutto, entrano con le armi e trovano una donna anziana con dei bambini. La gente si arrabbia naturalmente, perché sembra un'aggressione verso degli innocenti. Loro hanno solo agito come dei militari, quindi il problema non è tanto lì, ma chi dà. Un'ultima domanda, credo, perché il tempo credo che va.
La redazione
finendo.
chiama.
It's me.
Last question.
How much do you think that the public opinion knows about what happened in Iraq in the last years? I mean, do you think that the US Army managed to hide the most terrible things that they do?
Nel mondo occidentale o ovunque?
I understand his question. You know, the Iraqis, don't forget the Iraqis have many opportunities to disclose abuses. They have Iraqi politicians, they have these many human rights groups, Iraqi human rights groups. Of course, they have the terrorists. All these people can let that story out. Now, the Haditha story, this is where Haditha story is this was a story that was broken by Time magazine, where soldiers were in a town, Haditha. There was somebody blew up one of the Humvees from a roadside bomb, and the others who survived in the other Humvees got angry, and they began to look for the guy who set off the bomb. And they went house to house, and they began knocking everyone down, children, old people. Maybe there were 20 of them they killed like that. And this information got to a human rights organization in Tehran, in Baghdad, and from there to reporters, Time magazine. So there are many outlets, is what I'm saying. There are many opportunities for the information. So I don't think there's anything. I'd be surprised if there's a big secret there.
From what you saw, and this is the last question. From what you saw, there is a difference by being a journalist of Al Jazeera in this moment of the...
Well, there was a woman journalist for not Al Jazeera, but one of the other Arab networks, I forgot which, who was killed. You know, the problem is that the Iraqis don't distinguish between combatants, people who are doing the fighting, and non-combatants, the people who are not doing the fighting. The Vietnamese were very clever. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, they're very clever. They know, they see a journalist, he can be a Jewish journalist, they don't care, in the Gaza Strip. So Palestinians will make a friend of him because they know that he's going to influence people back in the United States. And the same with the Vietnamese were very clever. You know, they invited people into Hanoi, and they were very smart because they knew that they could get their story out. But the Iraqis are not. They think all Westerners are pigs. And they think that even anybody with a camera is the same as anybody else. And look, they blow up thousands of their own people all the time. They set up these bombs, these suicide bombs in the marketplace, and 150 Iraqis are killed, innocent people, every day.
Perché non facciano gli iracheni minimamente distinzione. Per esempio i vietnamiti erano molto attenti a questo, ma anche per esempio i palestinesi nella striscia di Gaza, se vedono una telecamera ed è un giornalista ebreo non gli fanno assolutamente niente, anzi gli vanno incontro, lo invitano perché sanno che può portare una loro storia fuori. In questo caso non gliene importa niente, ogni occidentale è un maiale, no? Nel gergo dell'individuale l'infedele, per cui viene annientato, vengono fatti saltare in aria, chiunque, anche i loro stessi iracheni, insomma tutti i giorni ne muoiono una decina. Ok.
Bene, forse Giovanni noi dobbiamo
Ok.
chiudere?
Thank you very much. I think we have to start because then
Grazie.
we have to go on.
Do you prefer Italian coffee?
Yes, very much. But, you know, we have drink at home too.
No, gli altri porteranno un brevissimo saluto.
Do you have a machine for coffee
I don't have, where, at home?
at home?
I use a French press.